Today's episode surrounds a truly inspiring teenager who is full of kindness. 15-year-old Fletcher is our featured kiddo for the month of July, and he left a deep impression on the 3 members of the team that were lucky enough to meet him at his home in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. That team included Josh Veach, one of our co-directors, Jessica Santo, our community relations director and talented photographer, as well as myself, the storyteller for the team. Before we get into the recorded conversation with Fletcher's parents, I wanted to ask Josh and Jessica a few short questions on the personal impact meeting Fletcher had on all of us. Here is what they had to say. This is the Go Shout Love podcast. I am Seth Carnell. Okay, one question that I had when it came to Fletcher was that their social media presence is a lot different from other families that we've selected in the past, because it also came with some very negative experiences on social media. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about that? What was their experiences and how did that impact the selection of Fletcher and his family?
Well, Denise had originally had a page for Fletcher. Her friends had kind of encouraged her to go to social media and introduce Fletcher to everyone. And she did. And I think she talks a little bit about this in the podcast, but it was going well. And then she just one day had this really joyous moment with her son where he was rolling over as a baby. And I don't know if he was a baby. He was just a little bit older. Mm-hmm. He had this big smile on his face, and to her, it was just this wonderful moment. And she shared that photo, and she could see the, what's the word I'm looking for? The clicks start happening, and people were starting to see it rapidly. And she's staring at this image thinking, oh my gosh, what's going on? And then she saw the comments start flooding it, and it kind of went viral very instantly. And a lot of negative comments were being said about Fletcher. And she just immediately just took the page down. She didn't want to deal with it. She didn't want to read them. She didn't want to have really anything to do with it. And a couple of her friends had kind of encouraged her not to do that. You know, don't let them win. But her attitude was she just didn't want to read them. Her heart couldn't take it. So she didn't want to go up against the battle of the trolls. And
which is incredibly sad, because a lot of the families we talked to in the past in our podcast and in their conversations with them, they are overwhelmed with how much positive has come out of Facebook and social media and how people have surrounded them. Mm-hmm. It's very disappointing to hear.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is just the nature of the diagnosis that Fletcher faces. Mm-hmm. There is a very outward way that this presents itself that makes his situation more challenging on the social media front. Mm-hmm. And honestly, even as a team, as we were wrestling through that as part of the nomination process, it was never about the value of Fletcher and how much joy, we know he could bring the world, but it was almost on our end, the fear of like, what if that happens again? Mm-hmm. And honestly, there was a really good conversation, because our goal is like, when we're looking at families and nominations, we don't want to say yes to a family that we can't help win. We want to make sure that at the end of the month, it is a win for them emotionally and relationally and financially. Mm-hmm. And so if there are ever red flags that make us think that we're not going to be able to do that for a family, then for their sake and for ours, we just, that's one of the ways that we help filter through and not select a family. But Kristen, who was part of our team at the time, gave us a really good challenge to say, like, if there was nothing else keeping us from moving forward, then we can't let the fear of that keep us from moving forward.
Yeah, I think Josh and I were a little fearful that because we wanted to keep him protected. Mm-hmm. We wanted to keep him in that bubble we've seen negative things on social media before, and we didn't want to bring that to this amazing kid. And Kristen kind of pushed Josh and I to maybe look beyond that and take a chance. And I'm really, really glad we did. And something that changed my perspective on it too is when we were talking to Denise, Fletcher's mom, and I mentioned to her, well, are you comfortable with Fletcher's story being shared to a bigger audience than you're used to? And she had an amazing comment when she said, yes, she's comfortable because everybody needs to experience Fletcher to know Fletcher. Mm-hmm. And
it's very true.
It is so true. And it spoke volumes to me. And I wanted to know more about what she meant by that. So when we got to meet him, I just completely understood it, because, I mean, you met him too, Seth. Like, he's just so captivating and he's hilarious. And you just want to be his friend for the rest of your life, because he's just, to know him is
he leaves
to love him.
He leaves an impression or an imprint on you after you meet him. Josh, really quick, I want to ask you, you guys were sitting on his bed making bracelets.
Yeah.
There was no option to not make bracelets.
Right.
You
No,
had
yes.
to make them.
I was excited for that opportunity.
And now, but I want to preface this question with, we are not an overtly religious organization.
Yeah, we've talked about
That being
that in the past, that like faith doesn't come into play when in the selection of our families.
Correct.
And we're not a Christian or religious organization, but we, as individuals behind the organization, we are, I think, deeply impacted and moved by our personal faith. Yeah.
No doubt. Fletcher starts leading us in the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah. So we're sitting on the bed,
Right.
and there's these Post-its where it was evident that they had been like working on it and practicing. And
You can see it in the video.
I just
if you watch it.
yes, if you're watching this video, which you did a great job, by the way, Seth, on
you did.
Hey, thank
capturing that connectedness. But if you look at the Post-its, it's evident that they've been working on that. And so I just asked him, "Hey, what is this on your bed?" And he, that's when he said it's the Lord's Prayer. Cool. And I thought, oh, that's cool. And then he just starts saying it, and he's like, repeat after me, like in the way that I'm assuming his mom and dad are teaching him. And so I'm sorry if I didn't mean to cut you off on a specific question. But
No. You seemed, although I was looking at it through a camera, you seemed visibly moved by that.
Well, he was. And
I wanted to ask you, what
was so cool for me to witness with that too is that they were learning it. So they'd only written like half of the prayer out on these Post-its. And so when it got to the point where Fletcher didn't know it, Josh just like took over, and he knew the prayer. So Josh started saying it to Fletcher, and then Fletcher would repeat it after him. And it was a really cool moment to see.
Yeah, for me personally, it's probably been the most impactful one moment that I've had so far. And if you go back, if you're listening to the podcast for a first time, if you go back to the, conversation last summer on one of our episodes where you actually interviewed Rochelle and me, I talk about an experience with another kid and how that child, when I was in college, helped reshape my faith a little bit. And it was almost the same for me. Like the idea, because if you're familiar with the Lord's Prayer, it says, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." And it just like hit me in that moment. Like, this has to be a glimpse of heaven. The idea of Fletcher teaching me the Lord's Prayer. Is there anything more pure and more just wholesome and good than this courageous, persistent child talking about the goodness of God? I mean, I don't want to go too far into faith, but like for me, it was one of the most spiritual moments that I've had in a long time, and it's going to stick with me forever.
It was almost spiritually moving for me to see the kind of kindness that Fletcher extends to the people that are in his lives. Here's a kid who's been dealt a hand, and he's taken it, and he wants to express love and joy to anybody that comes across his path. He didn't want to leave any of us behind as we were making bracelets or going on a walk.
Or getting in our car to leave.
Right, getting in our car to leave. He wanted to make sure that we were off safely, and he was just an incredible kid.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about the inspiration, his personality going into this month's shirt design.
Yeah.
No other word, I think, encompasses Fletcher as kindness. Can you talk about that for a second? What went into that?
Well, we've touched on the bracelets, the bead bracelets that he makes, and that started as something he did in therapy, and I think his parents talk about that in the episode. But it's really an extension of the kindness that he has towards others. He started making those in therapy several years ago, and he hasn't stopped. And they estimate over 10,000 of these things that he gives away, and he gives them away to everybody. And what's beautiful about that is that he gets offended if you try to buy them. But there's no expectations. Like, he gives these away freely. And that's an extension of his kindness and his personality. And it's something that we can all learn from. And so the other word, when we're talking to families and trying to get an idea of a design direction, is we ask about, like, what motivates your family? What are words that come to mind that kind of summate where you are in life? And Denise mentioned the word persistence. And so really what kind of came to mind to us was the idea of persistent kindness. And so that's the idea of kindness being repeated over and over and over again. That's what ends up changing everything. So the multiple kindness being listed on the shirt multiple times is not just a design element. It's the persistence of this family that's shining through that design.
I know it may sound like I would probably say this every month because I want people to buy a shirt. So I would say, quote, "Oh, this is one of my favorite shirts." That's not true. You know, there's been some shirts like, that's a good shirt.
Yeah.
I love this one.
I do too.
Yeah.
Not only because of the cool design, but because of what it means for the kiddo.
And not even
I
Fletcher right now. Like, everybody needs to read that message right now with everything going on. And it speaks volumes to a lot of people.
Yep.
Yeah. So there's a unique thing that Fletcher is doing that we haven't really done before, and that he's willing to... He's donated a bunch of bracelets to us. How can someone get that?
So we are including a bracelet with every item that's sold in the shop during the month of July. So if you buy a shirt, if you buy a tumbler or a wine glass or a hat or a tank top, which are new, you need to check those out. Any of those, for every item that you purchase, we're going to send a bracelet as well that's handmade by Fletcher. And so 50% of gross profit during the month from all of those sales are going to go to Fletcher's family to help with any costs associated with the repair or maintenance of their handicap accessible van that is absolutely necessary for just day-to-day life for Fletcher. And so it's an older van. Denise shared it has higher miles, and so they're just if there isn't an issue now, there's going to be soon, and so they just want to have that kind of cushion ready to go for any maintenance or expenses that are needed on the van. So
how many bracelets did he give us?
Oh my gosh, it's a huge bag. It's probably like 700 or 800 or 1,000.
She said 900.
Yeah, maybe. And it's just and she texted me last night. She said, if you need more, I can ship more. And I texted her back. I said, I really hope that's the problem. I really hope that we move much stuff this
It
month
would be incredible.
that we need another 900 bracelets,
and I know
that would
we
be
can do
fantastic.
it. We can do it.
You know what I would love? I would love to be out somewhere and see somebody in a Fletcher bracelet.
Yeah.
I think it'd be so cool to walk against someone that I don't know and be like, "Hey, I know where you got that."
Yeah.
That's cool.
So if you're listening now and you want to make a difference in the life of this awesome family, head over to goshout.love, which is our shop store online, and you can make a purchase, and 50% of gross profit from everything during the month is going to go to Fletcher, and you'll also get an awesome bracelet. And if you're interested in doing a monthly subscription, getting an awesome t-shirt every month for kids just like Fletcher, you can sign up for a monthly subscription, and if you use the discount code podcast at checkout, you'll get $5 off your first order.
That's awesome.
So don't miss out on that.
Excellent. Hey, thank you guys.
Hey,
for joining.
Hey.
Hey. Meeting Fletcher was incredible, and I'm glad I get to do this with you two and the other members of the Go Shout Love team. I wish everybody could meet these kids, especially kids like Fletcher who make an extremely profound impact on us. And I can't wait for this month for people to kind of even get a glimpse of this guy.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
It's going to be great.
The following conversation with Craig and Denise is split into 2 episodes. This is part 1 as they are interviewed by Josh and Jess. You will hear Fletcher's ventilator on in the background. You may also hear some random noises and thuds. This is because Fletcher and his sister Maddie are bottle flipping and balancing a water bottle on Fletcher's head, along with quite a bit of suppressed laughing. I think they were also watching something on Maddie's phone. Basically, they were being teenage siblings. Craig and Denise have an incredible journey to share. To get it going, here is Josh.
Craig and Denise, thank you for joining us on the Go Shout Love podcast. It's great to be with you and to be in your home and get to meet Fletcher and your family. And so before we jump into the details of your journey, first, just introduce us to Fletcher. Tell us about your son, what he's like, what makes him happy, and things like that.
Well, Fletcher is 15 years old. He loves to go. He loves people. He's right now really obsessed with making bead bracelets, and he loves to pass them out. So he's extremely social, and he just loves people. So what do you think, Dad?
Well, he is very social. He loves to meet people and to talk to them. And the bead bracelets is a good in on that when he tries to give them away to strangers at the library or at the grocery store or wherever it might be.
We're going to come back and talk about those bracelets for sure.
Good.
That's a big deal.
It is a big deal.
And one of the other things you guys have talked about is music. Craig, what's his favorite kind of music to listen to?
Well, his favorite music is praise and worship music. He likes to watch those on videos on YouTube, but he does like a little bit of secular music also.
Sure. That's awesome. One of the things that we learned about Fletcher that you kind of shared with us ahead of our visit and has become, it's just cemented so quickly, is that people are drawn to Fletcher, that he has this connecting personality that just kind of draws that in. What do you think it is about Fletcher that draws people in?
Oh, goodness. Well, he's pretty persistent. So he will say hello to you over and over again until you respond to him. And one of the things I always joke about is like if a little kid in a wheelchair says hi to you, you just say hi back to them because that's what he does. And then in Oklahoma City, he's kind of like he's like a local famous person. So people have seen him on the news for his bracelets and a few other things that he's done. So people recognize him, and it's always great because as soon as they walk away, Fletcher will go, "Who was that?" It's like, "Oh, Fletcher, I thought you knew who that was. I don't know who that was." So
Tough being a celebrity, I guess.
Yeah, he just, of course, he looks different than most people, so that is kind of draws. I don't know if draws them in is the right word, but
it kind of creates an opportunity for connection.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So
awesome. And Fletcher has two older sisters, Kaylee and Maddie.
Yes.
And congratulations, Maddie, on your graduation coming up.
This Friday, right?
And so she will have been graduated
Yeah.
by the time this airs, but that's a big deal, especially in this strange spring season. Seniors have gone through a situation that's very different compared to most. But tell us a little bit about just your family makeup and how, I guess maybe describing the relationship between Fletcher and his sisters.
So we have an older daughter, Kaylee. She's 26. She does not live at home, obviously. And then Maddie. So she lives here. She just turned 18. And their relationship is pretty much like any sibling relationship. They argue with each other, but she'll also defend him to the death if need be. So, and Kaylee is really sweet and kind, and she doesn't have to live with him, so she she has maybe a little bit more patience with him than Maddie does. But she's starting to get where she doesn't take a lot of his business either.
Yeah.
Because he's pretty bossy.
Yeah.
And Maddie will not be bossed by him. And one thing I always say about Maddie is that she is the only one of us who can say no to him and mean it. So she stands by her no.
She knows how to put her foot down.
Yeah, she'll be a good mom.
Craig, I'm curious, as you've watched your daughters kind of grow up and also watch Fletcher grow up, how have you seen Fletcher's life impact your daughters?
Well, it's kind of hard to say. I think that they are probably a little bit more sensitive to other people and other, especially people with other needs. And Maddie and Kaylee both also have a cousin with Down syndrome too. So that and he both kind of help them to, I think, to better respond to people, to have a little bit more sympathy for what other people might be going through or whatever the case may be.
Not be afraid.
Yeah.
Not afraid.
Yeah.
Maybe helped shape the lens and how they view the world, how they view people.
Oh, hopefully.
Yeah, for sure.
So for our listeners who might not be familiar, can you tell us a little bit about Fletcher's diagnosis and how it affects him?
Fletcher has Epidermal Nevus Syndrome, and a nevus is basically a mole or a birthmark. So, and his happens to cover most of his face. And of course he has patches of it throughout his body. But when we got the diagnosis, it was that it wasn't a syndrome unless certain things happened. Which one would be, would he have eye problems, bone malformation, and neurological problems? And when they said neurological problems, I said, well, what do you mean by that? And she said, well, like he'll need help with math. And I was like going, oh, cool, Well, of course, Fletcher has a ptosis, so he has one eye that doesn't open all the way. He has rickets, so there's your bone malformation. And he is obviously delayed developmentally. So
he needed one of three for it to be a syndrome. And he got the jackpot.
All three of them. So anyway, he also has heart and lung disease, which is not because of the nevus. So his first year of life, we were in the hospital 6 times, I think, with him being intubated and having pneumonia. And
just to backtrack really quick, you had a healthy pregnancy, yes, right? With no signs or any signals of complications.
Now with Maddie, I had preeclampsia. I had an emergency C-section. With Fletcher, I had a great pregnancy. Mm-hmm. No blood pressure issues. I did, though, I was fearful that whole pregnancy that something was wrong with him. But I was 39 years old, so I was high risk. So I had, the ultrasounds, nothing showed anything was wrong with Fletcher.
Should they have caught it on an ultrasound, or is it something that's not typically? I don't know that you would
have been able to, because it's just skin. I've often wondered if he would have had a 4D ultrasound, if you would have seen the pattern of it, because of course it's changed over his entire life, because, now it's not smooth. Then it was smooth, but you definitely could see that there was something different there. And our OB, after she delivered him, because I had a scheduled C-section, because I had an emergency C-section with Maddie. So they, when she delivered him, she said that he had a rash. So she thought, he has a rash. We're going to take him to the NICU so they can check him out. And then I had a C-section, so I wasn't able to see him until I recovered for 8 hours. So Craig was with him, and they took a Polaroid picture of him and sent it to me. And I was trying so hard to get up there, but I couldn't until afterwards. And Craig and I talked before I got to see him for the first time. He said, okay, I know that's not a rash, because people
not
would
what you're
come
expecting when they said that there's a rash,
right? But that, I think they didn't know what to do, because she was shocked of, what's happening,
Mm-hmm.
So people would come in and go, that rash is looking better, it's looking better. And that's when Craig goes, Denise, it's not. We both know that's not.
So Craig, you knew pretty quickly that there was more than just something that might be temporary, or
I kind of figured that. Now the doctor told us that it was a rash, but when Fletcher was delivered, one of the nurses said, what is that?
Oh, wow.
And that kind of, I don't know if you remember that or not, but that sticks in my head. And the doctor really quickly hushed him. But so I kind of figured it was something a little more than that. They were just trying to tell us that to keep us calm.
Do you think that they were telling you that it was a rash because they were uncertain of what it was? Yeah. So they were trying to figure it out before they could tell you?
Yeah.
And how long was that?
Well, he was born on December 30th, so you're getting ready to come onto a holiday. And so at that time, there were no pediatric dermatologists in the state of Oklahoma. So a dermatologist that was 100 years old, do you remember? He came and saw Fletcher. And what did he tell you?
I think he said it might be linear sebaceous nevus.
But also, did he tell you not to Google?
Yeah, he told him not to Google, not to look it up, because you'll just worry yourself.
Yeah,
and it is pretty scary. I did look it up.
I was going to say, when you Googled
did you say that you saw him first by Polaroid? Is that what you said? Mm-hmm. So that tells us, we haven't covered his age yet in this podcast, but Fletcher's one of the oldest kids that we've ever featured on Go Shout
Right.
Love. And so that you said he is he 15 now? So even then, the idea of searching online for the availability of medical conditions
true.
and all the
Right.
different stories would not be the same as if you had gotten that right now, like today.
It wasn't Google. It was don't get on the internet.
You
right?
ask,
Yeah.
don't ask Jeeves, right? Like,
Don't ask Jeeves. Oh, jeez.
Yeah. So
so you kind of knew that something, you went ahead and looked it up though.
Yeah, I looked it up, and there were some scary pictures and stuff, and I know that you don't need to think of the worst, but sometimes you do, you know.
and I never looked it up
Never did.
to this day.
Oh, wow.
I'm just taking it as it comes. It's kind
Has
of
that
my
been
go-flow.
difficult?
Now I have looked to try to find another mom that has a kid with that, and have not been successful.
Do you have a statistic of how rare that is?
Yes.
Well, I don't know where I got this, but with the syndrome, I believe it's around 2 million to 1 odds.
Wow.
I can't tell you the source of that, but that was way back when we first got the diagnosis. I looked it up.
And I've asked every doctor, have you ever had a child with Epidermal Nevus Syndrome? And all of them have said no, except for Fletcher's eye doctor. And he said, yeah, and she's 25 years old. And, you know, I'm sure she did not have the severity that Fletcher has or need a ventilator to breathe. Right. So, you know, so that was my extent, is just kind of asking. Because I don't know. I would rather just take things as they come and just see how it goes and not expect the worst.
Mm-hmm. Day by day.
Yeah. Because it's not really going to change anything anyway.
Right.
I mean, it would be nice to have someone that you could talk to about it, but that had the same experiences as us.
Right.
But
it's one thing when you find a source that is going to encourage you mentally and emotionally, spiritually, and then give you practical advice on how to
right.
improve and give Fletcher the best life possible,
Right.
and make your lives as working together as much as possible. But it's a completely different thing to just search out stuff that only feeds your fear and only
Right.
feeds anxiety. Like, that's a completely different thing.
Exactly.
So take us back to those early years with him after you left the hospital. Did he come home with you guys?
He did not. He was in the NICU for 19 days. He was the biggest kid in the NICU because he was 7'9" when he was born. So he wasn't small, but he was requiring oxygen. And then, the thing with his skin and his eye didn't open completely.
He wouldn't eat.
And, the kid did not eat. So we brought him home after 19 days, and that kid did not eat. He did not sleep, and all he did was cry. All he did was, he was miserable. And we really didn't have a pediatrician that was up to it, and so she was like, well, I mean, I guess we could increase his calories, just real casually. And when he's about 16 weeks old, I had taken him to the doctor 3 times in a week, and he wouldn't eat, so she said we could increase his calories, and then we'll send out home health. And, we don't know anything about anything, or I didn't. And so I was like, well, home health, what the heck? So a nurse came to our home and she dropped an NG tube in him sitting on the sofa and said, usually when you do an NG tube, they x-ray it and make sure it's where it's supposed to be. And so for her to do that in our living room was quite
oh my goodness,
frightening.
And not something you were even expecting when she was coming to your house. You were not prepared for that.
And so she said, now if that comes out, just put it back in. I went, oh no, we'll go to the ER if that thing comes out. I'm not going to put that thing back in. And he was like, okay. So she left, and that very night, Craig's parents said, why don't you guys go have dinner, go to the movies, something, and we'll watch him. Oh, I'll never forget this night. So we went just to dinner, and it was too much. I couldn't go to the movies too. So we came home, and he was gray. Okay. And I was telling Craig, we've got to go. We got to take him to the emergency room. So we went to a hospital real close to us, and we didn't know. It was where he was born, so there was a NICU, but there was not a PICU. And the way it is here, I don't know if it is this way everywhere, once you leave the NICU, you cannot go back. So he would have to go to a PICU. So they ended up, trying to intubate him. You probably remember this night better than I do.
Yeah, they had some trouble intubating him. I just remember that. And, I don't know if you've ever seen that, but going down through the throat is kind of traumatic. They tried 3 times. I think they had an EMT do it.
They sent us to Baptist Medical Center, and they had a PICU. So he went via ambulance. I was in the front. You were driving behind. But the EMT is the one who was successful in getting him intubated.
And for those who might not know, can you explain what and why he needed to be intubated?
Well, we don't know exactly why. It may have been coincidence that he had an NG tube done at the same time, but he developed pneumonia.
Oh, wow.
And so he was having a really hard time breathing. And so
that's what caused his color to
right.
change.
He wasn't getting enough oxygen. Right. So it was a good thing
we debated
we did.
whether to take him or not. Let's just wait till in the morning and take him to the doctor. He would not have made it through the night had we done that.
And it was interesting. I mean, the way his skin looks, is obviously off color, but because it's not a normal color, it's kind of hard for us to tell. Is this something that is normal or not?
Normal for him, yeah. Right.
So it's a good thing we did take him at that time.
So that was his first admission he had. And in this, we found out that he was failure to thrive. He was malnourished.
You could have told him that. You've been fighting for that, yeah.
Right. And he had pneumonia in both of his lungs. So they put him in a medically induced coma and talked us into going home because it had been a long 24 hours. So we went home to try to rest, take care of our girls, because at this time, Maddie's 2.5 years old. And so Kaylee was 11, right? So, and I guess your parents must have stayed with the girls. I don't even know what happened. So anyway, so we came together ourselves, and I just remember thinking, I don't know how to do this. How do we do this? And we did it. And he was in that stay. We ended up, they kept saying he only weighed like 10 pounds. He was 16 weeks old and weighed 10 pounds. So he was, horribly
He's gained less than 3 pounds since he was born. Yeah.
Right. Because he wouldn't eat.
Yeah.
It was impossible to feed him. And because we would try everything. Speech therapy worked with us. We tried everything. So he was burning more calories trying to eat than he was keeping. Yeah. So it was a mess. So, but that was kind of our journey with his lungs.
Yeah.
Because like when he was in the NICU, that wasn't the issue. He was, requiring a little bit of oxygen, but not. But he wasn't ever intubated.
Yeah.
Those first weeks, that was the first time he was intubated.
When that incident with the home health and dropping the NG tube down, and then coincidentally the ER visit that night, what did that experience do to you guys as it relates to your trust in the medical field? Did that impact it at all? Because I'm putting myself in your shoes and thinking about the system that is supposed to help him maybe caused this significant turning point and scary night. Does that create pause for the next time a doctor or someone suggests this?
It did for me.
Not necessarily, but I do think that in our case, we knew something was wrong with him that other people didn't. It's obviously he's not like a normal child, but in some cases we know something is not right, that sometimes a doctor or nurse will just kind of push off, because they don't know him.
Right.
and you need to be more insistent about, this is happening. We need something. We need to take care of it. Like this NG tube thing. I mean, that was obviously not going to be the answer. I mean, we didn't know what it was, but we needed someone more to take us more seriously about that, I think.
Well, that's why I think what I got out of it is we just need a new pediatrician, and that's when in that I learned how to ask questions of like the nurses and doctors. So if Fletcher was your child, what pediatrician would you use? And then we had a new pediatrician before we left.
So he spent several years at an amazing place as a child, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that journey?
Well, for the first year, he was, hospitalized at Baptist, 6 or 7 times, always with pneumonia, always intubated, always, we'd go home. He was only home that first year for 9 weeks and not consecutively.
Wow.
So, like when he was 8 or 9 months old, we found out that he had a stenosis on his heart, and we tried beta blocker, we tried medication, and that wasn't working. So they're like, he's going to have surgery. So one day we went for a routine cardiology appointment, and we left the cardiologist. He sent us to our pediatrician. He goes, you need to go see your pediatrician. And then we left the pediatrician's office in an ambulance and went straight to Children's Hospital, which we had not been to, but they had the heart surgeons. So it's like, this is where you're going to have to be for him. And so we were there, and he had open heart surgery, and he would not come, they could not get him off of the ventilator. They said, would you guys mind going back to Baptist, and maybe they could get him off of the ventilator? And we're like, sure. Because we just thought I remember this process of, we'll get his heart fixed, we won't have any problems at all, and we'll be golden. Things are going to look up after surgery. And of course they did not. And within that, after we got there, they tried to extubate him and could not get him off of the ventilator. So it became, he's going to have a trach, and he'll be ventilator dependent, and he'll need long-term care, not something that we could do at home. It would be like we were running an ICU in our living room. So, because God is good, there's a children's center in Oklahoma City, and it's probably 6 miles from here, and
at the time, I think that was the closest one, and like 600 miles.
Yeah. So the children's center, it started out as an orphanage with the land run, and then it was a convalescent home, and then now the children's center has PT, has all therapies, education, and then 24/7 care. So Fletcher was able to be taken care of medically, and then also be able to have his therapies and his education all at the same time. So he was there, and he was really a very, very sick little boy.
I have a question really quick, and I don't want it to sound like a silly question, but what is the difference between, and I think some people might have a hard time understanding this, being ventilator dependent? Is that something that is close to, is that being close to life support, or is it two different things?
It's a good question.
Okay, good. Well, then I don't feel so silly asking it.
At that time when he was on the ventilator, if you took him off the ventilator, he wouldn't survive.
But
so that is life support in that
was
sense.
he conscious during all of this? Like, was he awake? And
well, they would go through periods where they would put him in a medically induced coma because he's working so hard to breathe that his body needed rest.
Okay.
So, like that first admission, that's when he got a G tube, and but we just did the nasal cannula with oxygen. So that's that was our first equipment that we went home with. So yeah, I would always say that he's critically ill, because.
So you guys were trying to get him better to get him off of the ventilator.
Right.
Okay.
Well, he wasn't ever at home on a ventilator. We just had oxygen.
Okay.
Just to help him breathe. And I think through that, he was working so hard to breathe that's where the stenosis came from. That's where that came from, that because he worked so hard that he kind of wore that like a callus on his lungs or on his heart. So that had to be taken out.
His little body was under a lot of stress.
Yeah.
The stenosis caused the heart to leak, which caused blood to back up in the lungs, which caused pneumonia, which caused him to work hard to breathe, which caused the heart to. It's
vicious cycle.
Yeah, it's idiopathic, means that they don't really know what caused it, but one or the other caused that.
Right. There's always the chicken or the egg, the heart or the lungs, Okay. So we, after all of those admissions, there would be talk of a trach just as an airway, just not that would have a ventilator connection, just because people have trachs that they don't have a ventilator. So that, I don't know if it terrified you, but it terrified me to think of a trach and taking care of it. And oh my gosh. And so
we've had a lot of Ghost Shot Love parents say the same exact thing.
Really? Mm-hmm. I believe it. It was terrifying.
Very intimidating.
Yeah. So
we've also had a lot of them say that while it was a really hard choice, that it was a game changer. That once they did, it was
their child was so much better.
Yeah, it was that it really did make a difference. But in Fletcher's case, that was talked about, but
was not done and wasn't
the right solution.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
We had to intubate him too many times, and eventually it was just the best. I mean, you got to cut a hole in him to do it, and you don't want to do that, but it ended up being the best thing to do. I mean,
yeah. So that came with the Children's Center. So when right after he was like a year old is when he went to the Children's Center, and so he was there. And like I said, at the beginning, he was really, really sick and kind of a scary baby. So, but he had a ventilator and a trach and a feeding tube. And it's funny to think, I think now, because remember, you couldn't take him out of the unit. The Children's Center is a hospital, and they have units that have, it's a big room and has 5 or 6, depending on how big the unit is, kids in it. Some of them have ventilators, some of them don't. And so you couldn't, and they have all kinds of fun things that they do for the kids. And I mean, it's really an amazing place, but you couldn't even walk Fletcher out of that room. As soon as you walked him out of the room, he would desat and turn purple, and you could take him right back in. And so we never got to do any of the fun stuff at the beginning. So that's funny to me, because now that's all he wants to do is go, know? So to me, that's funny to think of the extreme that's happened, to where don't leave him in a room anywhere, but so we were there for 7 years.
Wow.
And of course he got better and better. And at the end of 2007, he got really sick with, electrolyte imbalances, which was kind of new to him, and it was a real scary time. And he was in the ICU at Baptist, and we basically went back to the Children's Center to die. That was the prognosis, is that he's just peeing out his electrolytes. He cannot sustain them. We can't. And the Children's Center didn't want to do IV electrolytes. They wouldn't let him come back till he was on, electrolytes through his G tube. So anyway,
and at this point, he's 7.
No. He was. Yeah, no. In 2007, he was 3.
Oh, 3. Okay.
So,
and so at that point, you didn't think he was going to see 4.
Right. So we went back there, and it was really interesting, because when we got back there, it's from that day, he just started getting better and better and better. We were expecting the worst and having people come see him, because, anything could happen. And it was just from that moment on, he just got better and better and better and better and stronger. And, he couldn't sit up. He couldn't, of course, well, he still can't hardly do anything independently, but, you know, they especially had to lay his, maybe is that when we found out that he had rickets? Was then?
I think so, because that's when the doctor, when we were at Baptist, showed us his x-rays, and
Said he had the
basically
bones
said,
of a 99-year-old woman. Yeah.
and they're very, very muddy looking bones.
Yeah,
And we also found that it had several fractures at that time that we never knew about.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, his left arm is bent strange because of having fractures we didn't know about.
Right. Right.
So,
Not knowing about and not attending to. So, but.
So what do you, when you look back and you look at that season of where he was when he was 3, and then he comes back to the Children's Center, and then the prognosis seems to shift because he's showing this improvement that you really weren't expecting.
Right.
What was that like, and what do you chalk that up to? What do you think caused things to turn?
For me, I'll never forget worrying about that so much that he was going to die, that I had to get to a point of only the Lord knows the number of his days. He only knows the number of your days. So we're going to just live each day as it comes, because I cannot sit around and wait for him to die. And we didn't. We didn't. And his life, you know, I think a lot of people were praying for him. I think, you know, the Lord healed that in the way that, you know, was not maybe what we think of as healing, but he definitely started thriving after we got back and kind of shifted I shifted my perspective. I don't want to speak for you, but I mean, that became very real to me, that only the Lord knows the number of his days.
yeah, I mean, it's kind of at that point we all, I think, came to the conclusion that he's probably not going to make it. We kind of, you know, until then we had hope, and then we realized that he wasn't, and then kind of just gave it to the Lord, kind of, you know, went from there. I mean, we were preparing ourselves.
Yeah, we told our girls, you know, and teachers, and
God had a different plan.
he definitely has a good plan.
As I see Fletcher now in the ways that he thrives and connects, even with strangers, like he doesn't know us, but he
and it's an instant connection.
Oh yeah,
too.
like you were saying, and he just draws people in. I wonder how much of that just intrinsic DNA of his was maybe fed. I'm assuming that the environment of the Children's Center may be a little bit different than a traditional ICU as it relates to staff and environment and how people interact. And I wonder how much of the relational element plays into the physical element in a situation like that. For him to literally be in a place where only his sickness is being addressed, maybe that's a harsh way of putting it, but the physical issues that he's dealing with are being addressed, to being in a place where his whole being is being addressed. Right. Like there's more interaction and more connectivity and community, how much that plays into his development.
Well, we would also have people always tell us, now the Children's Center, you know, their census of probably like 100 kids. And there are probably, at the time that we were there, 10 parents to see kids. So most of those children are in DHS custody. So they don't have parents come see them. But the Children's Center is unique in a way that there's someone on the staff that would have this love for this kid that was all by themselves, you know. So, but we would have people tell us all the time that Fletcher was better or would be getting better because we were there. Because I went to see him every day, and Craig went and saw him every night. Yeah, he lived there 24/7
for 7 years.
For 7 years.
So you guys would come home, and then you would go visit.
And the Children's Center is designed in a way because of that. I mean, with visiting hours and like an ICU, you would stay with them, you know. But at the Children's Center, 9 o'clock,
They
you
forced
guys
the parents to go home.
Oh,
Yeah.
Now, how many children's centers are there in the country? Do you know?
This is the only one.
And it
Now
just
there are
happened-
probably another places like it, but to have the name, the Children's Center is.
It just happened to be 6 miles from where you live.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you guys are there for 7 years, and he comes home when he turns 8. Is that right?
Yeah,
And
just
how
turned
is that? How was that transition getting him home for you guys? And I guess really quick too, what made you guys make the decision to bring him home?
Well, that decision was kind of made for us.
Okay.
The hospital, Fletcher also started school when he was at the Children's Center. He went to the public school that was across the street.
Wow.
Bethany Elementary, which is where, Maddie goes to Bethany High School, but it's a little school district, and it's super small, but they're in charge of the kids' education at the Children's Center, but not all the kids go over there. So Fletcher's one of the few that went over there because they were like, Denise, he doesn't have any peers here. It would be great for him to go to school. I didn't want him to go over there because, we're in our own perfect bubble over there with kids who are different and who look different. And I didn't want people to be mean to him.
You had a little bit more control over there.
And Craig was like, why wouldn't you want him to go to school? He deserves to go to school. And I was like, oh, great. So we pursued it, and it was an amazing opportunity for him to go.
Oh, wow.
And the Children's Center created a video that Maddie was like the MC or whatever, and she talked about her brother and explained they look different, and he had BP, and he had, and they showed that to all the kindergartners. And then I went that day that they showed it, and if the kids had any questions, then they could ask me. And so the main question was, why is he so little? They weren't concerned with what he looked like. They weren't concerned about his chair or the ventilator, nothing. They wanted to know why he was so little, which was really kind of refreshing that, so he went there until we came home. And then since that's not our school district, so kids on IEPs don't transfer well. So I homeschooled him after that, but we brought him home, and it was a whole new world.
Because when you brought him home, did you bring home a bunch of medical equipment?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And we didn't have 24/7 nursing.
Right, so you guys had to learn a lot of this.
We did have day nursing at the time. We didn't go home without nursing, but we didn't have fully staffed. We've never been fully staffed.
Never been fully staffed.
And especially the night times.
Well, we had nighttime at first.
We did at first.
Yeah.
But
and we're pretty particular about nurses and the way that they talk to Fletcher, and the way, that first nurse, she didn't last very long because she called Fletcher a name, and I went and called the nursing agency and said, she needs to go.
We're firing this person for you.
Well, do you want just to wait until we find someone else? I said, no, she needs to go now. Mm-hmm. She needs to go now. And they were like going, okay. But, and it was rough because he is 24/7 care, but they replaced him, but we only had like 12 hours a day then, and now we have 16. And so anyway, it just that's a whole new journey. And then at the Children's Center, medical supplies flow freely. Right. And, I didn't know that. And so I had to fight for things with insurance and that he needed that, I had gotten used to. Like, for example, when he was at the Children's Center, they changed his trach ties 3 times a day. So that would be, how many trach ties in 30 days would that be? 90, right?
Yes.
So, well, insurance or Medicaid,
they have a different formula for
20 for the whole month.
Well, most people that have a trach don't also have a nevus around their neck.
Right.
And
he's
lot
1
of
in
the
2 million.
and the stuff that forms up around there.
Wow.
So
you've got
99.99% of the people don't need that many.
Right.
The formulas are made with the majority in mind,
Right.
and then it makes your situation that much more difficult to actually get what you need.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it was just interesting to think, don't throw that away. You keep you got to be more frugal with things than you are at the children's litter.
Yeah.
So it was definitely a culture shock. We had Craig's mom and his sister came over every night to help us, like give him a bath and just get him ready for bed, and it kind of gave us kind of a break because Craig was still going to work, but I was home with them all day by myself, and then we would have someone come at night. But they came over every night, and that was hard for Maddie. She didn't. Do you mind if I tell this story? She did not like all the people in our house.
That's a big change, though, because how old is Maddie at this time?
She was in 5th grade.
And, I mean, that's a lot of change for a 5th grader.
Yeah. A lot of our family was there, and nobody was paying attention to her.
Yeah.
Well, no,
They were, but that's a perception.
Well, there's no way that any disruption to what your normal is.
Right.
There's no way for that not to impact everyone, especially kids.
Right.
Like that's just
Right.
the nature. It doesn't matter if it's medical related or job related. Like when the normal, what you're used to, what your rhythms are, gets disrupted, that creates tension and stress. And
Right.
I think we're all feeling that in the world right now.
that's exactly right. Like no one, regardless of age, is immune to that. We're learning that right now.
Right.
And so I can only imagine what that was like for both girls.
Yeah. And Kaylee didn't live at home. She was 19 by this time, and so she had moved out.
She moved out right before Fletcher came home, which for the small house, that was a good thing.
Right. Right.
Is this the home that you brought him home to?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was definitely a culture shock and hard on all of us, So, I mean, when Maddie said, why do all these people have to go there? And there were her Mimi and her aunt who she adores, It was just like, okay, it's time for us to tell them not to come.
Yeah.
And so they quit coming, and she was doing better, and
Day by day, like you
Yeah.
said before.
yeah.
Thanks for listening. Remember, this is just part 1. Part 2 is fascinating, and you'll want to stay tuned for that coming up soon. If you would like to shout love for Fletcher this month, go to our website, goshout.love, and shop around. Every item sold in July will be used to help cover the cost of maintenance and repair on the family's handicap accessible van. Of course, included with every order this month is a bead bracelet handmade by Fletcher, one of about 10,000 he has made as acts of kindness that he is sharing with the world. Everyone should have their own Fletcher bracelet. Take a second to rate and review this podcast. That will go in helping us shout further to people who might be blessed by these conversations, and you can also do that by sharing it with a friend. Kindness is the word this month. So for Fletcher, let us be persistent in our kindness as we all go shout love. Thank you.